So being in the electrical field for nearly a decade now and teaching it for several years to students, by far the most common and most popular question that I get is, how can I go about getting into this field and how do I go about becoming an electrician? So as a result of this, I thought I'd make a video detailing steps that you need to take in order to become an electrician. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the number one thing we have to look at when we're discussing how are we going to be an electrician is we have to look at the law. Because this is the type of job where there are legalities around it, the same way as a medical doctor has to have a medical degree and be licensed, things of that nature. Same deal with a lawyer, or other traits like that. So the first thing we need to address, the law, which is relevant to where do you live. Now this can amount to the state law, the local law, which can be your counties, your cities, because they're going to determine all the different definitions, the different licenses you have to have, in some cases the type of insurance you have to have, as well as the type of experience and work that you can do or have to have. So obviously, with it being this specific to different cities, counties, states, and whatnot, we can't go over every single state. So I'm going to be going over in this video the steps taken as an example in my home state of Kentucky. And this is also one of the simpler states to get a license in and to do work in. So once again, moving forward, we're going to be looking at Kentucky and how you would get an electrical license in Kentucky, and become an electrician in Kentucky, which in many instances is going to be the same for multiple states. And with that, the first thing we have to look at with Kentucky is what is the actual definition of an electrician? Who's considered an electrician, and when do you fall into the criteria that surrounds an electrician? So in the state of Kentucky, an electrician is defined as any person who's licensed by the department, in Kentucky, that department being the Housing Development Construction Board, who's employed by an electrical contractor, is engaged in construction, alteration, or repair of any electrical system used for the purpose of furnishing heat, light, or power. And you'll notice I have a little tagline here for KRS. This is Kentucky Revised Statutes. You'll see these throughout this video. These are just the actual laws that this is referencing. Because once again, this is legally what an electrician is in the state of Kentucky. And another key definition for us to establish is what is an electrical contractor, mainly because our electrician definition referenced it. An electrical contractor is any licensed individual, partnership, or corporation that's licensed to engage in, offers to engage in, or advertises or holds itself out to be qualified to engage in the designing, planning, superintending, contracting of, assuming responsibility for the installation, alteration, or repair of any electrical system used for the purpose of furnishing heat, light, or power, and employs electrical workers to engage in this practice. So that's a whole lot of words for a simple idea of it's someone who works on an electrical system. If you're touching electrical wires, working on the system, making changes to it, repairing it, modifying it, then you by definition should be an electrician, once again in the state of Kentucky. Now you may have noticed repeatedly they use the phrase licensed by the board, license, and I've already said license a few times in this video. Well, that's because in the state of Kentucky, all electrical workers are required to be licensed. So do you need a license? And the answer is, well, do you work on an electrical system? Because a person who's not licensed as an electrical contractor, electrician, or master electrician shall not engage in any activities, perform any of the duties usually performed by an electrical contractor, electrician, or master electrician, unless the unlicensed person is under the direct supervision of a licensed electrician or master electrician who's present on the site where the work is being performed. So key notes here is, once again, you can't work on an electrical system unless you're licensed. However, we do have this little phrase at the end here, according to KRS 2278.020, and I'll point out that KRS for our next point here, is that you can work on the system if you're under the direct supervision of a licensed electrician. And that'll be another key point that we address further. So the number one step we have in our question of how do we become an electrician, what do I need to do, is we have to get a license. Which automatically, for a lot of people, begs the question of, well, What if I do the work without a license? What if I just start going to people's houses, changing receptacles, installing lights, so on and so forth? And the answer to that is any person who violates or aids in the violation of any provision of KRS 227A.020 shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be fined not less than $500, not more than $5,000, or sentenced to jail for not less than 10 nor more than 180 days, or both. So as far as Kentucky's concerned anyway, the answer of, well, can I be an electrician without a license? What happens if I do work without a license means more than likely you're going to be paying a big fine and you're probably going to go to jail for it. So I really want to stress this point of, if we want to be an electrician, state of Kentucky, as well as most places in America, we have to get that license. So we're going to take a couple looks at, well, what do we need to do to actually get that license? And the first part of that is, you may have noticed, we addressed an electrician as well as an electrical contractor, and that's because we have different license types. So our basic license type is what's called a Journeyman Electrical License, which is defined as an EE license. And this is just your basic introductory license. This is what technically makes you an electrician. They're the bottom kind of tier as far as the type of electricians goes. However, you can work as an electrician. You don't need supervision by anyone else. If you work for an electrical contractor, they can send you to somebody's house. You can do work and go about your day unbothered. Our next tier to that is what's called as a master electrician, which is an ME license. And this is your more advanced electrical license. And it's important to note that every electrical contractor, we'll address this a little bit later as a refresher, but every electrical contractor is required to employ at least one master electrician in their company in order to be able to function and do business, which is the main purpose for why a master electrician exists. The idea of the master electricians, they're essentially the person who supervises the work, signs off on paperwork and whatnot, and just make sure that everything is done as it should. And our last type of license, as far as Kentucky's concerned, is an electrical contractor license, which is a CE license. And this is the type of license you need if you want to own your own business doing electrical work. They're required in order to make contracts with the public. Depending on your city or your county, you need it in order to pull permits, if permits are required for that county. We could make a whole separate video just on permitting in Kentucky at that. But once again, even if you have that contractor's license, you have to have at least one master electrician work for you. And it's worth noting as well, you can be licensed as a master electrician as well as an electrical contractor. This kind of kills two birds with one stone. It lets you function as a business and also gives you an electrician's license where you can do work on your own. And this is a really popular kind of one guy in a truck idea, is you go out and get a master license and a contractor license and you're good to go. So now that we kind of went over the different kinds of licenses we have, we really need to know, well, what do we need to do to get those licenses? Because we can't be an electrician without the license, so how do we get them? So let's kind of talk through these different licenses, starting with the journeyman license. So for a journeyman license, the first thing we need to do is we have to pass a journeyman licensing exam, which if you're going through one of the most popular testing centers is called the 703 exam. And we'll probably make a separate video at some point covering the licensing exam. It's a big deal. All the other videos on the channel are kind of dedicated to the idea of getting someone ready to take that exam. But we'll go over there some more detail in probably a later video. But in addition to passing the journeyman licensing exam, you also have to have 6 years of work experience in the electrical field. You may notice I put under supervision. It's because if you remember back to our earlier rule about licensing, is that you can't do electrical work without an electrical license unless you're under the supervision of a licensed electrician. And this is kind of how you go about getting the experience, even though you're not licensed, is you need to be doing your 6 years of field experience while you're under that direct supervision. And this is just so you can learn on the job. So you're going to be learning on the job under direct supervision until you get enough field experience that you're competent on your own. That's why there's this 6-year parameter around this, is that's how long it probably is going to take for you to be able to work unsupervised safely and know what you're doing. However, we do have some alternatives to this 6 years of field experience. The first one being that you only need 4 years of experience, assuming you've completed an electrical apprenticeship program. And we'll go back to this registered idea just a little bit later. So if we complete an electrical apprenticeship program, which is typically going to be a 4-year training program, same year as a 4-year college degree, that shortens the amount of work experience we need down to only 4 years. And typically, under a normal apprenticeship program, you would be working while you were doing your apprenticeship program. For most apprenticeship programs, it's actually required. You have to submit what's called on-the-job training hours every month in order to continue being in the apprenticeship program. So typically, instead of 6 years field experience, you're going to be working for 4 years while doing an apprenticeship program. At the end of it, you take your licensing exam and you come out as a licensed electrician, journeyman. And the other alternative we have to this is that we only need 3 years experience, assuming we get a 2-year degree from a Kentucky Community Technical College system. We'll be going over these technical colleges just a little bit later, just bear with me. So we can see here, this reduces our field experience even more down to only 3 years. The only thing to keep in mind with the 2-year degree route is that oftentimes you're not going to be able to work while you're going and getting your 2-year degree due to the way college structures typically are. So this means you're more than likely going to have to go to college for 2 years, then once you get out of college, start your 3-year field experience. However, coming out with that previous experience and that 2-year degree can oftentimes help you a lot with finding employment or getting a job, as opposed to with the 4 years in apprenticeship idea or just the straight 6 field experience idea. You're going to be applying to different places with no experience in electrical, with no work history in electrical. So the 2-year degree option can be really viable, especially if you live in an area where it's very competitive to get into those entry-level positions and there's not many opportunities for them. Next, we'd be looking at the master license, which would be the next step after we get a journeyman license, if we decide we want to go get it. And we'll be going over how you determine which license you really need based on your goals a little bit later as well. In order to get a master license, we need to pass the master licensing exam, which is considered the 701 exam. Once again, we'll probably be covering these in the exams in a separate video. So it's important to note that there is a different exam for the journeyman license as well as the master exam. Now, a key note I will make about these exams very briefly is that if you know you ultimately want to be a master electrician, if you pass the master licensing exam, that also fulfills the exam requirements for the journeyman exam. So instead of taking the journeyman exam, then taking the master exam later, you do have the option of taking the master exam and skipping the journeyman exam. However, there are a couple of notes and considerations to take into account of that we'll probably cover in the more detailed video about the exams. So in addition to passing the exam though, you also need 8 years of work experience in the electrical field. Now obviously, if you went the route of getting your journeyman license, at this point you're either going to have somewhere between 3 to 6 years field experience, so that would get subtracted from the 8 years. So if you worked for 6 years, got a journeyman license, and then wanted to get a master, you would only need 2 more years of field experience in order to get the master license. Now, alternatively, we do have these alternatives, same way we did with the journeyman license. You only need 6 years of experience if you went through the apprenticeship program idea. It's the same as the journeyman license. Going through the apprenticeship program reduced our field experience requirement by 2 years. And the same deal is with just the field experience idea. If you went through a 4-year apprenticeship program and did 4 years field experience, you would only need 2 more additional years in order to get a master license from the journeyman license. And then of course we have our other alternative, which is 5 years experience with a 2-year degree from the Kentucky Community Technical College system. Once again, only 2 more years above the journeyman license. Meaning the base idea here is that if you were in pursuit of a journeyman license, you got your journeyman license, no matter which route you went, you only need 2 more years in order to get the master license. Which leaves us, of course, with only the contractor license to go over at this point. In order to get a contractor license, you have to pass the contractor licensing exam, which is 231. Now, this exam is completely separate from the journeyman and master exams and doesn't actually cover electrical specifically in the state of Kentucky. The contractor exam is actually going to focus more on business requirements, laws, and things of that nature. So it's an entirely different idea. Once again, would be something covered in more detail in another video than here. So in addition to passing the contractor exam, you also have to provide a proof of liability insurance. And this is a genuine insurance. You would actually just go through the same type of insurance dealer you would get your vehicle insurance or homeowner's insurance through in most cases, and get what's called a general liability insurance. And what this does is that if you have a contract with someone that you come do electrical work for them, and you installed that work against code or incorrectly, and it caused property damage or damage to or hurt someone, this insurance would basically pay for those costs. So if you installed a receptacle in someone's home, didn't wire it correctly, and it caught fire and burned their home down, this general liability insurance would cover whatever fees needed up to a certain amount based on what type of insurance you have, which Kentucky requires a minimum amount of insurance, would cover the fees in that situation. Now, in addition to the proof of liability insurance, you also need proof of workers' compensation. Basically saying if you have employees, if they get hurt, you're going to pay them workers' compensation, or your insurance will pay them workers' compensation. And a good note here is that if you don't have anyone that works for you, back to our one guy in a truck idea, there is a waiver available that you can sign stating that you are the only person that works for your company, you don't have any employees, and as such do not need to get workers' compensation. So these things are the only thing we need, in addition to, as mentioned earlier, having to have a master electrician employed by us, and their license number, their master electrical license, will actually be tied to your contractor license. These are all we need. So you don't actually need any type of electrical experience in order to get a contractor license. It's almost a whole separate animal from the electrical license. It's just important to note that if you want to go get an electrical contractor license, you will need that master electrician signed for you, which can either be yourself or another person. So this, of course, now that we've kind of walked through our bullet points here, we know the different types of licenses. We know what the requirements for each type of license are. The first thing on that bullet list, besides the exams, which like I mentioned a couple times, would really need to go over in another video. The first big thing we have is, what about work experience? How do we get work experience? What counts as work experience? Kind of the simple short answer to this is get a job, which I know it sounds a little bit blunt, but that really is what you have to do in order to get a license. Obviously, you're not going to be licensed if you're trying to get a license, which means you're going to have to get a job either with an electrical contractor, for a master electrician, or a journeyman electrician. Basically somewhere where you're going to have access to working with a licensed electrician so that you can get that basic level of work experience. Now, once again, like with the KCTCS route, the Kentucky Community Technical College system, you may decide to go that route, which can help you get your foot in the door, and also means that you're not going to be going straight into the field. You're going to be going through a college system first. But even after getting through that college system, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to get a job. But the big important takeaway here is that it does need to be in the electrical field in some way. You can't get a job with an electrical contractor working as a janitor for them, and that count. You need to actually be in the field doing electrical work under that supervision of a licensed person in order for it to count towards getting your license. And then once you have enough field experience and work experience to get your license, all you need to do is either submit your tax forms stating your job as an electrician assistant or an apprentice electrician, something to that effect, or just get a signed letter from your employer saying you've worked for them between start date and the current date or your end date, and stating your job, what you did, things of that nature. And it really is that simple. You just need to go out and get a job, which I know I say it's that simple. I know depending on where you live and the availability of those jobs, that can be a little bit competitive, but it is something you will have to face if you want to go the route of being an electrician. Beyond our work experience, though, we have our optional education routes. So you could, once again, go right into the field for a journeyman license, get that 6 years field experience, then get 2 more to get to your master license if you want a master license. But I wanted to cover those other routes we have available with our apprenticeship training and our college idea as well. Taking a look at apprenticeship training, we have a couple different options that are available to us as far as how we get this training. The first and one of the most popular ways we do this is actually through an electrical union. Basically, every electrical union, no matter where you're at, and there are electrical unions in local chapters in Kentucky as well, is going to have you do an apprenticeship program. Now, depending on your specific chapter or what branch of the union you're in, this could be a 4-year apprenticeship or a 5-year apprenticeship. Meaning if you go the 5-year apprenticeship route, you may have to wait a little bit longer before they sign off on your paperwork saying you've completed the apprenticeship, and that means you're eligible to get a license. However, once again, almost all unions will offer some form of apprenticeship, so the training is there. Beyond that, you have independent apprenticeship programs, 2 of those being associated builders and contractors and independent electrical contractors. These are going to be institutions that typically employers will pay or contract with or hire to train their employees for them through their apprenticeship program. Meaning, if we take ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors as an example, they have a full 4-year apprenticeship program that if an employer had an employee, they wanted to go through an apprenticeship program so that they could get an electrical license, they would pay Associated Builders and Contractors a certain amount of money per semester or per school year in order to send their employee to classes there where they would be trained and they would get their apprenticeship experience. And the next option we have is a contractor in-house apprenticeship program. This is going to be a little bit more exclusive usually to the larger companies that really have the financing and resources to offer this, but there are companies out there that have their own in-house apprenticeship program where they have instructors that they hire specifically to train their employees and get them through the apprenticeship program. Now, the big idea with all these apprenticeship programs, and the most important note though, especially with the contractor in-house apprenticeship, is that it has to be Department of Labor or DOL registered. And I make a big point of this because there are places out there, once again, specifically your contractor in-house apprenticeship programs, that say they are an electrical apprenticeship, but they're not Department of Labor registered. And what that means is that in Kentucky, the Department of Labor is in charge of tracking and kind of over all the apprenticeship programs for electricians in the state. And if your apprenticeship program isn't registered with them, when you go to apply for a license and state that you went through that apprenticeship program, it will not be counted as fulfilling that requirement. Meaning you may agree to go work for a company that says they have an apprenticeship program, and you spend 4 years with the company to go through their apprenticeship program, only to find out it wasn't Department of Labor registered. That means that apprenticeship program didn't count as credit. Meaning at the end of those 4 years, you won't be able to get an electrical license, and you're going to have to wait 2 more years to get your full 6 years of field experience before you'll be able to get a license. So So this is always something that I want to make sure people are wary of, especially when they go to work for a company. Now, sometimes you may have to just go work for a contractor or a company that either doesn't offer an apprenticeship program or they offer one that's not Department of Labor registered, just to kind of get your foot in the door and get some of that basic experience so that maybe you can go to another company that does offer an apprenticeship program or does offer one that's Department of Labor registered, if you're coming from one that isn't registered. In those cases, sometimes you just have to do what you need to do, but I don't want anyone going into what they think is going to be an apprenticeship that gets them a license when in reality it won't. Now, our other training option was our Kentucky Community Technical College systems. Once again, these are specific to Kentucky. It's in the name Kentucky, but these are going to be a college system that offer a 2-year degree, and it's going to count as credit towards getting your electrical license. In the state of Kentucky, there are around 16 locations for these schools spread all throughout the state, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them are going to offer the degree that gets you this, which is going to be a electrical technology degree or something very similar to an electrical technology degree. The base classes and courses you take are essentially going to be the same. And this is really a pretty straightforward option. I mean, just like any other college degree, you're going to go to college, you're going to attend your classes, you pass them, at the end you get a degree, and it counts as credit. Once again, this is a really good option if you live in an area where maybe there's not a lot of demand for inexperienced people or people who are new to the electrical field. It can really kind of set you apart and get your foot in the door at these companies so that you can get the work experience you need. And some people just enjoy the college experience and want to be able to do it. So it is a very viable option. So now that we've walked through getting your field experience, getting education if you want to go that route instead of just field experience, that leaves us with the question of, well, which one of these licenses do I really need to get? And the question for that is, you need to ask yourself is, what do you want to do? Because depending on what your specific goals are, what you want to do in the field is going to determine which of these licenses you need. And I really kind of summarize it down to some pretty simple ideas for people. First being, if you want to work for someone else, meaning you want to go work for a company or a person, you don't really want the headache of being your own boss, managing your own company. In general, that means all you need is an EE or an ME, which is your journeyman and your master license. A lot of companies, majority of companies, are only going to require a journeyman license, and they don't really care if you have a master license. But there are companies out there that if you go on and get your master license, they may want that for those supervisor positions, maybe a company executive type position, or you may be able to get in at a company that's looking for a master electrician to sign for their contractor license, and this is another option. And if you're applying for a very competitive company, this can set you apart from the other people that only have a journeyman license. On the subject of master license brings us to our next idea, which is if you want to own your own business or you want to do side work, and side work being the term, for after your normal 9-to-5 job, or in construction, usually your 7-to-7 job. If you want to do additional work on your own after that to earn some extra income, for this you're typically going to need a CE and or ME license, which is your contractor's and your master license. And once again, this is just going to be because you need that contractor license in order to actually do contracts with the public, in order to pull permits, and then of course you're going to need that ME license because every CE license needs an ME tied with it. And you're probably going to struggle to find a master electrician who wants to tie up their license with your contractor license, which is why I typically advise people in this situation to get your ME license. That and the fact that it just looks good for your business. You have to ask yourself, would you want to hire someone to come into your house and do work for you that wasn't even a licensed electrician themselves? They just employed other electricians to come do their work for them. And it's worth noting as a quick note that there are other licenses and certifications that are related to the electrical field that are applicable, such as getting an inspector's license if you want to be an electrical inspector, NICET certifications and licenses if you want to work in the fire alarm field or if you want to be a fire alarm inspector, and VIXI certifications if you want to work in telecom, fiber, things of that nature. And if it's requested, we may do some videos in the future that kind of cover these other licenses as well and go over some of the pros and cons of each of them. So now that you know what license you want to get and how to get it, congratulations, you're officially an electrician. So I hope this video was helpful for everybody. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below. I'll answer what I can. If you have suggestions for something you'd like to see in the future, let me know. Be happy to go over those. We'll probably be taking a look at those exams for sure in the future. Otherwise, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys next time.